Thank you for tuning in to the Patricia Show. My name is Patricia. Please press like, subscribe, and share. Share this audio with someone who you may think need it. We're going to talk about, so I've been talking the last couple of weeks about the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Judas. There are other Gospels. But before I got into explaining those other Gospels, I wanted to teach or tell you why these very important documents were hidden for over 1,600 years. These documents were direct words of what Jesus said and what Jesus taught. So it seems like, or you would think, that the church would really want people to hear it, right? Really want you to know. But they've kept you in darkness for so long. They never tell you what Jesus teach. On Easter, they simply go over. I remember going to this church once, and the only thing the preacher said for a whole hour and a half was he died and he rose. He died and he rose. And people would be screaming and hollering, and he would just keep saying it, playing the music. I said he died and he rose. And and I was sitting there like, wow, they're not learning anything. Because what did Jesus talk about? What did Jesus say? What did Jesus teach? Why are we focusing on him dying and rising? That's not even the part of Jesus' life that you should even be focused on. You need to focus on what he taught. And then I remember I went like years later, maybe even about I'm going to say 7 years ago, because this time is passing so quick. I went to this Catholic church, and I met this lady, and she was telling me to come to service with her on Easter because they did a whole play, of what happened with Jesus. So I went, and what it was I guess you could call it a reproduction of when Jesus was carrying the cross and when he was getting ready to be crucified. They basically just went over that. And they were like, following his footsteps. What he did when he picked up the cross, what he did when they put the crown on his head. You know what I mean? Just kind of going over everything. But they still was focusing on he died and he rose. As I sat there, the Spirit kept saying to me that they should not be focused on that. They should be focused on what he said, what he taught. But they didn't want to focus on that because they didn't want to tell you that. So let's talk about that. These Gospels were first the ones for Thomas okay, so I'm going to go through these Gospels. They were found in 1945 somewhere in Egypt. But this is what we want to talk about. Why were they hidden? That's what we want to talk about, okay? So the historical people agree on several strong reasons as to why they were hidden for 1,600 years. Okay, so the first reason was the earlier churches wanted people to believe that God is separate, that salvation comes through the church, that the priests are the gatekeepers. But these texts that were found in Egypt in 1945, that is not what they were saying. Jesus was teaching in there. And Jesus said, and they were taught, God is inside of you. You don't need a priest to reach God. The divine spark is already within you. These teachings threatened any hierarchy religious system. So the church labeled these books dangerous because they empowered the people and they did not want you to be empowered. Reason two, these books taught that Jesus' message was as esoteric. These gospels, the gospel of Thomas, Philip, John, the teaching was mystical knowledge about intertransformation, direct experience of God, and higher spiritual realisms. The church did not want Christianity to become a mystical path. They wanted one official version of Jesus to unify the entire empire. The third reason, the Council of Nicene. Those were a group of priests that were put together by the Emperor Constantine in 325 AD. When Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity, he needed one political religious, one doctrine, and one version of scriptures. Anything different or spiritual was rejected. These texts did not support the political versions of Christianity being built for the Roman Empire at that time. So they were outlawed, burned, or hidden. Reason four, these books taught that the soul is eternal and powerful. The texts that were found were they were teaching humanity existed before this lifetime. Your soul, all of our souls come from light, the light realism. We can ascend spiritually. We are not slaves to sin or the physical world. This conflicted with the church teaching that you are sinful by nature, that you need the church to save you, that salvation only comes through obedience. And the books that were found, the Gospels that were found in Egypt in 1945 said the opposite. So do you see how they have basically been teaching lies all of this time? They are not teaching the truth. Okay, so, all right, so let's continue. We're going to go to reason 5. These are the historical reasons why they kept this from the public for 1,600 years. The fifth reason, these teaching came from early Christianity groups. And Christianity was about inner knowledge. Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. It came from early Christianity groups competing with the churches. And these spiritual groups, I guess in the beginning, believed Christianity was about inner knowledge, direct communication with God, awakening the divine spark. That's what these smaller Christian groups or early Christian spiritual groups were about. They were competing against the church. The church, these churches, they wanted to eliminate that competition, so they destroyed these scriptures. The reason six, the books were buried to protect them. Around 367 AD, Bishop, I cannot pronounce his name, and Antheus issued a decree banning all books except what the church approved. The monks in Egypt hid the banned texts by placing them in jars, burying them near cliffs, sealing them for protection. That's why they survived, and they remained hidden for 1,600 years until they were found or discovered in 1945 in a certain area in Egypt. Most of these books that were found were the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, John, the Gospel of Truth, the Thunder Perfect Mind, the Apostasy of Acons. They all teach that God is inside of you. The divine spark is within. Salvation equals awakening, not the church rituals. So I just want to pause there for you to even think about this and absorb this in, how we have not been taught the truth. So I'm going to end this here, and then I'm going to do a part 2 of why this information was hidden. Because you have to sit back and think, if they hid this information from you, clearly it was something they didn't want you to know. Why didn't they tell you the truth? I remember a long time ago, well, it wasn't that long ago, maybe about 7 years ago, that somebody in the Catholic Church, an official high up in the church, came out and said that the Catholic Church was a business. And they were in the business of making money. And if you realize that you're powerful, that everything you need is right already inside of you, and that you can communicate with God directly, that you don't need the priests or the prophets or any of these things to communicate with God, that would make you so empowered. And then you would stop giving your money to them. And if you stop giving your money to them, then what would they do? They're not going to be a business anymore. So why would they teach you the truth? To jeopardize centuries and centuries and centuries of people depending on the church and giving all your money and everything to the church. That would basically put them out of business. So why would they tell you the truth? So you have to think, people. You have to really wake up and think for yourself and ask, what is really going on here?